energy per dollar. And that's a very important thing to remember, is that raw resources have very large energy per dollar, and finished products have very small energy per dollar. So if I trade raw resources for finished products, I lose every time, and I lose big time. So what are we doing? The developed countries of the world are sucking raw resources out of the developing world and sending back finished products. And so we have the trade advantage every time that we do that. So here, the trade advantage turns out to be almost 340 to 1 in terms of the energy value of the two things that are traded. Now, some people say, well, what's that got to do with anything? Think about what energy is. It drives the process. And so, if I get something that's a raw resource, and I put it into my industrial system, and I start upgrading or value adding to that raw resource, I am employing a huge number of people, my economy is bustling, and everything else. Then I import a Walkman. What does it employ? It employs maybe the person that sold me the Walkman. All of the employment happened over in the U.S. that built the Walkman. And I use that example because I was in Papua New Guinea about 20 years ago, and we're cruising down the street, and here's this guy, he's walking along, and he's got a Walkman on his head. And I just had to stop and ask what he was listening to. So I pulled up and I asked him in Pidgin English, which is a very interesting language. What are you listening to? And he hands it to me. And I put it on, the Walkman's old, it's broken, only one thing is working, and he was listening to the Mamas and the Papas sing California Dreaming. Now, what they had exported from Papua New Guinea to get that was an incredible amount of raw resource. Copper, tuna, you name it. Forests, and he had this thing, and it was playing the Mamas and the Papas. I said, time up. 5. I think I may make it. Okay. Now, the other thing that's really important here is this official exchange rate. Anybody know how that's developed? So here's all the bunch of countries. Here's their currencies. Here's the official exchange rate. Somebody decides whether or not they have any confidence in the yuan, and so they're buying and selling, and you wind up with some kind of an official exchange rate. We calculate the energy-based exchange rate, which is the exchange rate of energy per dollar based on this GDP, SEJ per GDP. And then we say, so what's the difference? And what we find again is, of course, the US is 1, because it's our dollar that's doing it. And every developing country in the world is really being they're being taken advantage of. I mean, look at that way. 20 to 1, just in terms of the exchange rates of their two. This has nothing to do with trade now. This is just exchange rates. So every time they trade, they're getting not only taken advantage of because they're usually selling raw resources, but then they're also being taken advantage of because the exchange rate is so phenomenally bad. All right. Debt and debt relief. We had a project funded by the United Nations Environmental Program a couple of years ago, and we were looking at the Sahel region of Africa. And one of the questions we ask is, if we look at debt repayment based on the energy that's inherent in the dollars that they export versus the dollars that they're paying, how does that stand up? What does that look like? And so here's a little graphic, maybe it'll work. There's Niger and its economy over there, here, and here's the IMF and the global economy. And so they borrow some money, well, first their economy, and then they borrow some money, and it has a certain energy per dollar ratio. And then they repay with their dollars. And notice the big difference. There's an order of magnitude difference between the energy that's inherent in their currency and the energy that's inherent in the world currency. And so there goes then the demand that they buy those Walkmans that I was just talking about from the developed world. And here is the world, where did it go? Oh yeah, the world now taking resources from Mali. And when you look at that, there's a huge problem with all of that. And I'll skip that and we'll go right into, so here we have time, debt up, credit down. And so you start out with some debt to the rest of the world, and you repay theoretically, and at some point in the time, you are now have paid it off, and that's money and energy, because my currency is worth so much more. In theory, I would pay it off a little early, and in fact, if I keep paying until my dollar eventually becomes zero, I'm now down here where the world owes me. I've paid my debt, and now it's the other way around. And so that's the payoff time difference. And so here, so the payoff time and the overpayment amount. And here is Niger. They paid off their debt, according to Emergy, in 1974, which is right there. And it has been a negative ever since. And the world, according to Emergy, owes Niger $1.5 billion because they've overpaid their debt. And here are all of the Africa's overpayment. And if you look, you'll see that every one, with the exception of Rwanda, has overpaid their debt, and it's anywhere from 2 billion to 200 billion overpayment based on the energy value of their currency. Debt relief should happen now, and it should happen 100%, rather than we ought to pay them all of the money, but at least erase the debts. That's the study. You can download it now, I think, from the UNEP site. So there were 2 books that were produced there. And
fantastic. Thank you very much. Particularly those last slides, who here seconds the idea that Professor Brown will be the next head of the World Bank? What I love about your presentation is it reminds us that economics, if it wants to be a science rather than a nonsense, needs to remember the real world and start with the real world in mind. We can't take questions now. Please, if you have a question for Professor Brown, write it down so you don't forget it. We'll try and squeeze in some questions at the end if the organisers allow us to overrun slightly. So thank you very much for that presentation. Now, congratulate yourselves. You have arrived at the last substantive paper presentation of the whole conference. And like in any good event, like a rock concert, you say the best to last, the headliners. So we now have the authors of the seminal report, Energizing Money. We have Ludwig Schuster, who's a freelance project manager and consultant for social entrepreneurs with a long-term experience in the field of complementary currencies and alternative finance. And he's a member of the Scientific Committee of the German Radio Guild Association. So he's, like his co-presenter, doing both a lot of thinking and also very connected to on-the-ground innovation. Josh Wright Collins is the co-founder of the Brixton Pound, which you just saw a video about. But he also works with the New Economics Foundation's finance and business team. And he's the lead author of your required reading for the rest of your lives. It's called Where Does Money Come From? It's essential reading. It really does help lay to rest any doubts around the nature of credit creation. And of course, once that's clear, you then have to start looking at what he's doing at looking at more democratic alternatives, including strategic credit creation by governments and central banks, full reserve banking, and complementary currency systems. So, over to you, the Lennon McCartney of the currency world.
Thanks very much, Jan, and thanks to all of you for your patience still being here at this time when the beach is obviously cooling. We're going to go through the report quickly. It's a 70-page report. Hopefully some of you have had a chance to take a look at some of it over the past couple of days. Some ways it might have been better to have done this at the beginning of the session, but I still think it will be helpful for us to go through the basic findings that came out of the research. Big thanks to the Fortune Foundation for supporting a piece of research that NEF has been wanting to do for a very long time into this vitally important relationship between money, energy, and the wider economy. The objective of the report really was to look at a very, the full swathe of proposals, actual projects, ideas in this field, where you can include different kinds of models that are directly about linking money to a commodity like energy, currencies, and accounting systems such as the one you've just heard about from Mark. What we noticed straight away was that there's multiple objectives here. People are employed in different projects, they have different ideas of where they want to get to, and we should be thinking very much about taking out the best from all of these different proposals, rather than trying to search for a sort of the best model that sorts out all the world's problems. And I think we've seen the last few days the variety and the diversity, and we need to hold on to that. But we did want to use this report to try and cut through some of the complexity and to ensure that the idea of linking money to energy is taken out of the niche, perhaps, that it's currently caught in, and taken out to a wider audience so we can engage with a wider audience. Just to summarise the report quickly, we focused the first chapter really on the relationship between nature and the modern way of thinking about the economy, neoclassical economics. I'm just going to talk very briefly about that in the next slide. Then we look at the relationship between nature and money, of which I think we've heard a lot already today, so I'm not going to repeat that. And then we developed a taxonomy as a way of guiding our thinking through the different models that we've heard about, and Ludwig is going to talk us through that. And we also looked at a very wide range of case studies, and Ludwig's going to talk about some of those. And the diversity, as I said, is extremely interesting. And then we have conclusions, and Leander Bindbach is in the audience here, very kindly helped us put together an appendix of 36 other examples that we thought were very interesting for further exploration. So that's at the back of the report. Just to say, the report will be, it's in your folders, but it will be on the NEF website in a couple of weeks for free downloading. There are some areas which we will be correcting, so just to let you know about that. Just on this first point about economics, modern day economics, sort of reiterating what Mark's just said, the key point for me that perhaps hasn't come out today is that this model, where essentially you have these factors of production, the key point about it is that these factors of production that enable the economy to go round, in neoclassical economics, there's an assumption that they all come somehow from households, that we as property owners, we own the land beneath us, we own the soil, and thus in the production process we give it to firms who turn it into goods and services and return money to us. And the idea really is that those natural resources essentially are substitutable for capital or for labour, that they have to have infinite substitutability. The reality is, what we've been hearing over the last few days, is the real economy looks like this. And those natural resources, those flows, and this is again the difference between stocks and flows, those natural resources that we need to do everything else in the economy are not substitutable. They're outside the capital and labour. You can substitute capital for labour, you can make technological efficiencies, you need less labour, or vice versa, which is actually what we want to turn ourselves into a more sustainable economy. But you can't substitute energy, sunlight, and solar power, and all the other kinds for capital and labour. And this is a huge misunderstanding in neoclassical economics that we need to move beyond. And a really good way of doing that is to account for energy properly in our economic system in the way that we just heard Mark and others describe. And the flaws in the monetary system, I'm not going to spend any time on at all, because I think we have absolutely covered that over the last 3 days. So over to Ludwig for the
taxonomy.
Thank you. Is the mic working? Is the microphone? Yeah, it's on. Okay, great. So, I just, instead of starting with the taxonomy, I just wanted to ask a question to everybody in the room. I won't ask the question if money should be linked to energy, and I wouldn't dare answering it today. But maybe a more simple question: should everybody have access to water? What do you think? Just raise your hand if you think everybody should have access to water.
Yes.
Wow, that's quite a lot. How do you know what I really meant? Maybe I didn't mean tap water or drinking water. Maybe I didn't even mean water that you could consume, but seawater. Maybe I meant the access to water. Maybe I meant something completely different. And would you still agree that everybody should have access to water, even if it's quite expensive at any price? I don't know. I don't really know. And this also applies to the question of who really is asking that question. Is it the Human Rights Watch or is it Nestlé? So it would make a difference. And then in that very same sense, the question if money should be linked to energy cannot be answered without being more precise what the question really means and who is asking the question, what objectives. So the objective thing is one key issue. The basic question we posed in the beginning was if money should be linked to energy, or in effect it was meant the other way around, if energy should be linked to money. Money should be energized, or in contrast to that, if energy should be monetized to achieve very different goals. One goal would be to cure the monetary functions, to cure the monetary system. And the other objective would be maybe to cure our energy system and to guide the way to a transition to a more sustainable energy supply system. So what we basically did then was to examine the two domains in which we are working. This is the money domain and the energy domain. And we saw that in the money domain, we could distinguish the three basic functions. I'm not questioning if that's the right thing to do, to stick to these three functions. But anyway, we have the unit of account function, we have the means of exchange function, and we have the store of value function. In the energy domain, we can distinguish basically between energy as an accounting value and energy as a commodity. So we see that Mark Brown talked about energy or energy as an accounting value. There may be also different other accounting values which are similar to that, like net energy return, energy invested, and so on. Embodied energy. There's lots of types of accounting energy flows, energy inputs, and so on. What's the difference? The big difference is that energy is only a commodity if it's traded, if it's available for one but not for the other, if it can have a price, if you can access it and unitize it and consume it and transfer it and so on. You can't do all that with energy as a pure accounting value. So when we are in the domain of energy as a commodity, then there's further questions to be taken into account. That's, for example, we do need to distinguish what we mean, what kind of energy we mean. That could be energy that we consume or energy which is saved. What is relevant is the quality of energy, like Mark Brown already pointed out if it is renewable and or non-renewable, and if yes, in what form, is it wind energy, solar energy, and so on. So this will make a difference. And certainly any kind of these commodities can also be put into a basket of commodities, and this would also make a difference for the currency design. Then we looked at the links between those two domains. An energy currency could be a currency that has only a reference to one of the two, to the accounting value or to a commodity, or even only to its price. But it could also be physically backed by the energy, which means the one who is issuing the currency really holds the currency, or is expected to hold the currency, commodity, sorry. And in that case, it also makes a difference if the holder of the currency can redeem it for the commodity of the issuer or not. Then this will lead to another basic distinction that we found was related to those currency functions and energy types. The basic distinction between a non-redeemable unit and a redeemable unit. So you can distinguish all the energy concept, just energy money concept, just by asking that question already. For the non-redeemable units and also for the others, you can ask the question if that you can also ask if that the money you're talking about will only measure the value, which is the accounting function, or if it is transferring value actually. So you're transferring, on the one hand side, you're transferring the monetary union, but on the other hand side, you will also trade the commodity which is involved. So the three basic functions of money, I've put it into three columns just because the three functions are closely related to the energy characteristics. So the difference is concerning the functions, if the currency does only the accounting function, or it provides also a transfer of value, which, by the way, the energy proposal did not. So the energy proposal, as far as we have heard today, would be in the accounting column. And then a currency could also be redeemed or not, so we have the redemption principle, which is very closely related to the store of value function. So a currency unit which is redeemable will provide very good for the store of value function, whereas a means of exchange, the means of exchange function may not be dependent on the store of value function. But if we take a closer look at the redemption, then we will see that it will make a difference in currency design. If you can redeem your currency for energy, we're still talking about energy as a commodity, you can't redeem it for the accounting unit. If it's redeemed for energy which is readily available today, which is produced on demand, or which is available already when the currency is issued, or if it is redeemable for future production, that means that you may have invested in the future production, then you get a promissory note for the production of energy in the future, but the currency will have its value today. So, on the one hand side, so those are two aspects of the store of value function, which in classical economics correspond to the two terms hoarding and investment. So you can save value from today for the future by hoarding your currency or hoarding your assets or hoarding your claims for a product. Or you can put your money into a bank account, the bank is investing it in future production, and then you will be available to buy the commodity later on. So these are the two distinctions of saving, hoarding or investment. And then there's another distinction which these three basic functions of money don't reflect, but what we heard is really essential for money. That is the fiat credit principle, namely to issue currency in advance without somebody needs to save. So if you issue a investment currency in advance, you could, through spending into circulation a promissory note for future production, you could finance whatever you like, as long as people believe that the expected projected production will really be provided. So this is the basic taxonomy we have made up during our analysis, and in a way this should help you to assess and to compare the different energy money types which have arisen so far. And it could also be designed as a guideline for designing new currency types in this field of energy money. Now the basic distinctions, if we get back to those to these basic distinctions which underlie the whole taxonomy, is if the units are used for only comparing things, which was the case in the energy proposal, or allocating commodities, allocating energy. If it's a unit which leads to allocation, then it can be distinguished if it is only reference to the energy commodity, or if it is really backed by the energy commodity. And if it's backed, the basic distinction that can be made is if it's irredeemable or redeemable for the energy which it relates to. And then if it's redeemable, it can be further distinguished in an energy debit, which would be the hoarding principle, or an energy credit currency, which would more correspond to the investment type. And in the energy credit realm, we could see that there would also be the possibility to issue the currency in advance, and that way create a fiat credit energy currency. Just to illustrate all these distinctions, I have chosen three different examples, which is left in the left upper corner is the kilowatt cards. Somebody here in the room may know it already. Then the Sonnenschein node in Steierberg, where Margaret Kennedy lives, which has never been implemented, unfortunately, and the kilowatt dollars node, which also is on the cover of our report. So if we look at the kilowatt cards node, we have a redeemable currency, which is redeemable for energy available today. So it's a commodity that is traded, and that is energy which is produced today. So we have a stored value. It's physically backed by the energy, and it's redeemable for the energy at the energy supply company. Interestingly, at any energy supply company in the world which is connected to that system, which are quite a lot. And it is related to final energy. This is used energy, renewable energy, which is consumed. Or not even only renewable energy, I don't know about that. But what we see here is that this currency clearly fulfills the store of value function. This is its its core function. So you can save in these units and avoid inflationary effects in energy. You can pay with that currency in 10 years and still will receive 10 watts or 10 kilowatt hours. It also fulfills the unit of account function and the means of exchange function. So it's a true currency. Then the Sonnenscheine notes are not much different from that. The basic difference is that they are issued for future production. So you can invest in the setting up of a solar power plant. And then these, and you will get in return these Sonnenschein notes, and you can use them to pay in any shops that are, are at the place. And sorry, 5 minutes. Okay. You can use it for any shops that are at the place which are connected to the system. So this is a currency which fulfills the investment principle. Now the last example in this regard is the renewable energy dollar by Shan Turnbull. Hi Shan. I hope I don't get things wrong, so you correct me if I'm wrong. In that example, what we found out basically is that the Renewable Energy Bank Turnbull proposes does nothing else than a bank does today. It takes into its accounts securities, which is collateral usually. In this case, the Sonnenschein notes would be taken into the bank as a reserve, and the bank would issue another currency on that basis, which would be the means of exchange. So while the Sonnenschein notes fulfill the store of value function, the kilowatt dollar notes would fulfill all the other functions. So what we see here is that basically a currency does not need to fulfill all functions in one, but the whole currency architecture may do so.
You got it right, but it's not what I got presented today.
I know you didn't present it today.
Change my mind.
So, anyway, not all of the examples fit into that scheme. We saw, for example, the Sonnenschein in Berkeley. They are denominated in 900 kilowatt hours, which is quite much. So, and they are not meant to be transferred to anybody else. They are accounted directly on your energy consumer. While they fulfill the unit of account function and the store of value function, they do not fulfill the means of exchange function. So maybe they cannot be called an energy currency. That's a matter of definition. The same is true for the energy proposal, which is completely clearly at the left, as I said. So what works and what not? I would give to Josh at that point. And yeah, we have only 3 minutes left, I think.
Yeah, I will finish off very quickly so that Yuri wants to move on to the next session. Key findings, as I said, different objectives will require different models. I think we felt, as I think's come out from this conference, that we do need a new reference, a unit of account that links our accounting system to the natural world. I think we'd agree with that. Price in nature and this non-substitutability issue. This is obviously a really challenging top-down reform. It requires states to act together collectively. We've seen the failure of Rio just recently, so not huge optimism there, unfortunately. In a way, I think we should concentrate our efforts perhaps on stimulating local and regional energy transition. And as Ludwig mentioned, the debit energy currencies can both play a role as a more stable store of value and encourage more sustainable consumption, particularly if they're linked specifically to future renewable energy production. But I particularly think there's real possibilities with this idea of credit creation, which we've heard about, Richard talking about it, others talking about it, and public credit creation being linked to the future productive capacity of renewable energy sources, whether it's wind, whether it's solar, whether it's hydro, because this is a way of giving us that power of credit creation that's so important if we're going to make this great transition to a low-carbon, sustainable future. We hold on to that credit creation power that linking to directly to a commodity like gold, as we see, won't enable us to do, but yet we maintain some control over it. And for me, that's the most important thing that's come out of this conference, is how do we link our monetary system to the real, sustainable, future productive capacity of our world. We can develop that idea that Ludwig's talked about. To do that, going forward towards the future research agenda, we need to encourage more innovation, more experiments, but we need to learn from the past. Some of these models, you can see here, the Delhi dollars and Shan's model, 30, 40 years old. Let's make sure we learn the lessons from these models as we go forward. Let's scale them up. Let's pick out the best, let's scale them up. I think we need more research on the legal and regulatory constraints facing these projects. I think the talk from Marisa was a fascinating insight into how you can get a central bank to engage with this agenda. Perhaps something that many of us just write them off, but it's possible, and there's very interesting things happening in Latin America there, particularly. And finally, I think we need to engage with a much wider range of stakeholders, and we've talked about some of those energy companies, credit unions, local finance initiatives that are basically on our side, ethical finance, building societies, we heard from Pat today, local government, really important, small businesses desperately need support, they need working capital. How can we support their agenda? How can we listen to their needs? And also I think that the big NGOs, the environmental NGOs, the development NGOs, I'm sorry to say that there's a very poor level of understanding amongst these big organisations with large sums of money. A lot of them are addressing the sticking plaster issues rather than the fundamental systemic issues that we've been talking about at this conference. So how can we engage with them?
I think that's
so move the agenda forward.
a great point to end on. Thank you, John. To remind us of how we may share this critique, but the wider world doesn't. Rio+20, there were three big declarations: the government declaration, the declaration from business, and also from the People's Summit. None of them mentioned the word monetary, none of them mentioned the monetary cause of our current crises. So there's a lot of work to be done. And the way that you've shown how to approach this in a very systematic way, and think about how can we design currencies that will reconnect us to the natural world rather than sort of separate us, I think is really important. So thank you for that. Thank you to our other speakers. I'm told that all our speakers for this session will be able to now stay with us on the panel and take questions as part of the final panel. I think it's a good idea. So thank you once again. Give everybody a round of applause.